Hi guys, former Tory minister and Brexit Party MEP Anne Widdecombe compared rejoining the EU with Flat-Earthism. Okay, that makes a huge amount of sense, but then we are talking about Anne Widdecombe here. She was responding to comments made by Richard Morley, the deputy leader of the Rejoin EU party, and business leader turned politician Gina Miller at the march on Saturday. The Brexiteer listed off a number of problems with rejoining the European Union, such as the euro requirement, open borders, and ironically, the cost. Have a listen to this.
First of all, what is not being explained here by Gina Miller or by anybody else is the sheer costs and the upheaval that would be involved in rejoining.
Okay, the cost. She goes directly to the cost, which is funny, because Brexiteers back in 2016 never mentioned the cost of Brexit. They never demanded an impact assessment. Now, according to Bloomberg, it's costing the UK economy £100 billion a year to be outside the single market and the EU. £100 billion. Now, let's say that's an exaggeration. Even if we were to cut it in half, £50 billion a year is the cost of Brexit. And Anne Widdecombe is saying it's too expensive to rejoin. As I said, back in 2016, there was no impact assessment required. Brexiteers never mentioned the cost.
You almost certainly have to take on the euro, for example.
Now, the euro, unfortunately, I think is going to be perhaps the Brexiteers' trump card. Now, it's not a valid argument against rejoining the European Union, but I think it will be powerful because of nostalgia and because of this idea of patriotism. Look, if we join the European Union, we're going to have to give up our currency. We're going to have to, we will no longer be able to look at our currency and see the picture of the king or the queen or whatever on it. And of course, this is something that many British people feel proud about, the currency, the pound, stuff like this. The economic argument is a different one, but I think it will be perhaps the Brexiteers' trump card. Now, of course, it's not a real argument because technically, yes, Britain will have to adopt the euro if it wants to rejoin the European Union. But in reality, it may not, because if it doesn't meet the economic requirements, if it feels that it doesn't meet the economic requirements, it will not be expected to adopt the euro. There are a number of countries in the European Union that don't have the euro, for example, Poland. So as long as the UK says, actually, we haven't met the requirements, then there will be no requirement for it to adopt the euro. That's the reality. But I do believe that Brexiteers like Anne Widdecombe and others will say we can't rejoin the European Union because we'll have to give up our precious currency.
Costs of rejoining would be prohibitive, and there would still be a very large section of the country against it. It wouldn't be worth the political upheaval. So
now, you can't say, well, because a lot of people are against something, we shouldn't have a referendum. This is not about rejoining. This is about having a referendum. This is a bit like Scottish independence. The argument is, well, this is going to create a lot of political problems. But we're not talking about rejoining. We're talking about having a referendum first. Like, why are you denying people democracy? Remember, this is about having another referendum, allowing the people to decide. Why are Brexiteers against that? If they truly believe that they would win, then they should support a second referendum. Then the issue will be resolved for another generation or another 10 years or whatever. But they're against another referendum. Is it because they think they will lose? But then if you think you're going to lose, then what's the point in making the argument against any of this?
I mean, I think you might just as well campaign for a flat earth as campaign to rejoin the EU.
That was a weird analogy. Okay. It's not like campaigning for a flat earth, because the UK used to be a member of the European Union. The UK joined the European Economic Community. Flat earths never existed. And it's strange that somebody like Anne Widdecombe would make that argument because, you know, she shares a Venn diagram with people who probably believe there is a flat Earth.
But there is something much more subtle which can happen and which I think is at the top of Starmer's agenda, which is you don't rejoin the EU, you just stay aligned to it. So you accept its law.
But the UK has to accept its rules because it's accessing this, it's trying to sell into the single market. So if the EU sets the standards and the rules in the single market and you want to sell into that, then you have to follow the rules. Isn't it interesting that Brexiteers never complain about, look, we have to follow these rules that the US sets on its import requirements? The Brexiteers never complain about that. Why do we have to follow US rules when we sell into the US market? We should be able to set our own rules when we sell into the US market. It's exactly the same thing. If you want to sell into the single market, you have to follow those rules. You are a rule taker. If you want to sell into the Japanese market, you have to follow their rules. If you want to sell to the US, as I said, you have to follow their rules. But the Brexiteers don't have a problem with that. They only have a problem with EU rules for some reason.
Accept openness of borders. You started.
This is nonsense. An open borders. What is she talking about? Open borders.
Accepting things that we actually rejected in the course of that referendum. But I also blame the Brexiteers because I think we need to make the case much more clear. We've had some fantastic trade deals, entry to a market that's 500 million people. We've had.
How can you start off with talking about cost and then finish with, well, we need to make the case for Brexit better by look at all these wonderful trade deals we've signed. Yeah, the Australian trade deal, New Zealand trade deals, these are doing wonderful things for British farming. A US trade deal was promised by Brexiteers as soon as the UK left. That isn't even on the cards at the moment. And even if the UK were to have a trade deal with the US, and this is something that Brexiteers keep banging on about, it'd be a wonderful trade deal. Wonderful for who? Will it be wonderful for Britain? If we look at, the Brexiteers gave away everything to have a trade deal with New Zealand and Australia. New Zealand and Australia came out better. How do you think Britain would deal if Brexiteers are in charge with a trade deal with the US? The NHS would, of course, be on the table. British farming would be decimated once again. Do Brexiteers understand that doing negotiations with a superpower like the US, who do you think is going to come out better? But they don't seem to care. But anyway, CPTPP adds 0.08% to British GDP. So it's not worth it.
Had fantastic trade deals, and we don't make the most of it. And all you ever hear from the Brexiteers is grumbling that Brexit hasn't been done, which it hasn't been. But
I thought Brexit was done. Boris Johnson said Brexit was done. I keep hearing all the time that Ramoners need to move on because Brexit is done.
Even the little that we have done, I think has brought big benefits, and we should be shouting them from the rooftop. And it's not true what Gina says, that Brexit has broken Britain. Brexit has actually helped Britain, and it's worth pointing out that our exports to the EU are up.
Okay, why are exports up? Technically, yes, but if you take into account inflation, exports are down. So if you want to cook the books, Anne, yes, exports are up. But if you want to actually understand reality, exports are down. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.